Okay. Hello, everyone. Super good to see you. Although I don't actually see you because I just see a screen in front of me. Still, I kind of imagine you watching me on the other side. So good to see you virtually. I'd like to start with a story from the time when I was still a quite junior engineer, working for one of the bigger companies. And I remember like one day I came to work, I started my day regularly, I was working on something, and suddenly I hear like a quite a loud argument on the open space. And like I take off my headphones, start listening what this thing is about. And like really, believe me or not, but like 3 or 4 people were actually arguing about a top versus spaces thing. Like they were doing some kind of code review, I think. And 3 people were like telling this one person to use spaces in the code formatting, right? But this one person was like, no, why? I'm gonna use tabs. If you want me to use spaces, show me a document that says I have to use spaces. So this went on for a while. I'm not sure how this ended because I went to grab a coffee actually and lost my interest in the whole thing. But why am I telling you this? I'm telling you this because this situation is a perfect example of a high friction situation. This is what I call high friction, meaning like there was some tension, some heat, and things didn't go as smoothly as they should, even though that this was kind of unnecessary. So today, I'd like to share my thoughts, why being low friction is important, and how to sort of check yourself and think about it in your daily work. Couple of sentences about me. My name is Dawid, 11 years of professional experience, 6 years as a leader. And currently I'm working as a senior engineering manager at Glovo in our Warsaw office. If you'd like to contact me or ask any questions offline, feel free to. My contact details are at the bottom of the slide. Getting back to the topic of friction. So what do I actually mean by friction? Well, we all know the definition that comes from physics. It's basically a force that's resisting motion of elements sliding against each other. But well, like we, the people, when we work together, we also kind of slide against each other. We interact. So there's also friction when it comes to people. And there can be different levels of friction, right? Like if there's just some friction, it's actually pretty good. That's what we want. Because, well, some small dose of friction means there's healthy conflict, there's constructive discussion that's happening. People are challenging each other ideas in a reasonable way. And also, if there was no friction at all, like we would just maybe go too fast. So just good enough dose of friction is kind of beneficial. Speed is decreased, some heat is produced, all is good. But what happens if there's like high friction, a lot of friction? Well, as we know from reality, if there's too much friction, things actually start burning because there's too much heat produced. So in reality, and with people, this means like slow decision-making, emotional discussions, like unpleasant cooperation. And ultimately, like if there are certain people that tend to be high friction, these are not the people other people usually like to cooperate with. So today, I'd like to present you 3 questions. 3 questions I found useful myself when thinking about friction and how am I doing on the daily basis. The first question is like, do I understand different perspectives? So we as people have different roles, obviously, different knowledge levels, which means like we may just look at the same thing and say something completely different. That's why like I try to remember that it's worth to have an open mind. It's worth to be empathetic. And it's always worth to assume other people's best intentions. One other thing is also not assuming people know what we know, even though it's pretty tempting and something we do by default. So as an example, let's say you're having a discussion with someone and you completely disagree. Like this person is saying something that does not make sense to you. And you're, of course, tempted to respond, like maybe not agree openly. But before you do it, just think about this. Like, what's this person's perspective? What do they know? How do they understand this very topic? Like, and why did he or she say this particular thing? Like, just do a step back and think for a while before responding immediately. Another thing I'd like to share today is about optimization. So we are all humans. Of course, this means we are a bit selfish as well. And well, we tend to optimize for ourselves. Well, we all know that local optimization is usually not necessarily optimal. And we all know that it's worth to look at a bigger picture. But guess what? We tend to forget this, right? During our daily discussions, we quite often get to a situation when we look at something from a very narrow perspective. So an example that happens, I guess, happened to everyone is when you're discussing a solution, I don't know, maybe solution of a problem to solve in your team, and there are multiple options on the table. And you start pushing for one of them, right? It sounds the easiest and the most optimal thing to do. But the question is like, who is this optimal for? Is this optimal for you? Is this optimal for your team? Or maybe is this optimal for the company? So a question I encourage you to ask yourself is, do I optimize for the system? Do I optimize for both short-term and long-term, or is my vision quite narrow? And last but not least, I'd like to talk about letting it go. So as I said, it's okay to disagree. Healthy conflict is really good. It sparks important discussions. It makes us prevent mistakes. But if we treat every discussion as a, well, like last opportunity to stop an upcoming disaster, then things quickly get emotional and discussions get unpleasant and also frustrating for the participants. So something that was super useful to me, and it was, well, some sort of very important moment, I guess, in my career development, was learning to navigate difficult discussions with a calm and rational approach. Well, it sounds obvious, right? Like that's what we should do by default. But again, like it's easy to forget this on a daily basis. Like really don't let your ego get in the way. It doesn't matter like who is right. It matters what's right. And it's also important to make decisions quickly, like especially the easy ones. We just make a decision and move on. So imagine a situation you're having, maybe a discussion during a code review, and you're arguing about some not very important thing, like some naming convention. Everybody has their own opinion. You don't seem to agree. And what now? So the question is this maybe the moment so we just should even disagree, but make a decision and commit to it and just move on? Maybe it does not really matter in that case, and it's not worth to spend a lot of time on it, right? Just letting it go and not fight every battle. So to sum it up, questions I ask myself: do I understand different perspectives? Do I optimize for the system? And should I let it go? Just think about it and be low friction. Thank you, and back to the studio.